In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a slab built cup. We'll start off with a simple tall cylinder, then I'll do some shaping and add some ridges for texture and a handle. You could make a similar type of cup, or maybe you want to carve a different sort of texture in there, or use your stamps or your rollers. Generally, if you use stamps and rollers, you want to do that before you assemble the cup. You want to do it while that slab is still flat, lying down. We'll show you how to do that in another video. You'll want to start off with your leather hard slabs that are 1/4 inch thick or thinner. You don't want them any thicker than 1/4 inch. They should be leather hard. You rolled them out, probably made your slab lasagna, and let them sit loosely covered for 24 hours or longer. This slab has been sitting with newspaper underneath it and on top of it, loosely covered in plastic for about 24 hours at about 70 degrees. That feels nice. It's pliable, but it has some stiffness to it. So I'm going to use this to create a slab cup. It dried faster than a thicker slab might because it's thinner. Surface area to volume ratio will cause it to dry out faster because there's more surface area compared to the volume of the clay. So I want to just show you a super simple slab cup that you can make. So what I want to do is just make sure that I have a nice clean edge, and then I want to make sure that it's square. This is just going to be a simple tall cylinder, so I need something that I know is square, like a book, a very good book here. This is a good one to use as a reference. And I'm going to cut off this edge, and I want to keep as much of this slab usable as possible. So I'll just cut it right here so I know it's square. This edge lined up perfectly up here. How big that cup is going to be, somewhere about there. And that's pretty tall. I think I want it like 6 inches tall. It's going to shrink by about 10%, so it'll be a little shorter than that. I'll mark that and then mark it again. So before I cut it, I just want to make a mark. Don't get too hasty here and mess up your valuable slab that you've been working on. I want to be really careful when I bend this. Just see how, yeah, that's about how much I want, and then I can leave some of this to make my bottom, or just in case I need more clay. Get my 90-degree angle. I'll cut it all the way down, and then I'll put this to the side. Now I know that this part, I do want to cut it. Line it up and cut it. Now I'm going to bevel this edge a little bit, because what's going to happen is I'm going to roll this over and it's going to tuck on there, right? So I want to bevel this a little bit. I could cut it, but it's so thin I could get away with just doing it with my finger. And then same thing here. Just want to cut off any excess clay. And then I will score that edge. I can use my fork or my precision scoring tool I got right here. And so I'll score this edge on the front side, and it's going to connect to the back edge there. So I'm going to score that back edge. And I'm being real careful not to fold this slab too much, because it's going to remember any creases or folds that I make in it. And then I'll get a brush with some water, score it a little bit more. There we go. Look at that. So I'm kind of making slip on the surface of my slab, and then I'm going to carefully roll this over and attach it here. Make sure that's nice and straight. I'm going to hold it up here so I got a little more control. Carefully push that down
And then one trick I can do here is kind of lay it down and then get my wooden modeling tool and get inside of it and compress that seam. Smooth it with my hand a little bit. Get to the other side. Smooth that out. Now I'm going to fix this seam. It's nice if your scoring actually continues a little bit beyond the overlap, just to make sure that you get good contact with your scoring so that you're not smoothing it onto unscored clay. You want to make sure that it's smoothed onto a scored surface. I put my hand in here to support the inside so that I don't smush it too much. Now I want to get it as round as I can. This side seems to sit a little flatter, so that will be my bottom. And I'm going to just kind of shape it round as best I can. And then I'll get my slab that I have left over, and I'm going to check that again, make sure it's good and round, and place it on there. Maybe you have a cap or something that is close to the right size, and you can actually put it on your slab as a guide. So now I can see that circle, and it can help tell me how round my bottom really is, because I want it to be pretty symmetrical, pretty round. I'm pretty happy with that, so I will now trace that circle around the bottom of my cup. That looks good. Now I'm going to score right along that edge, the inside edge of where I traced. Always good to do a little more scoring than you think you need, because you want to make sure to get a good attachment. I'll use a little bit of water with my brush, and then I'll score the bottom here. Use a little water and activate that surface. Check this again, make sure it's pretty round. Stick it down on there. Give it some pressure. Look at it all the way around. I think it looks pretty good. And then I will cut the excess. And I want to cut it real carefully. And if anything, I want to leave a little bit of extra material down there just to smooth it all together. I don't want to cut like into it. I want to cut kind of straight down, giving it maybe like a millimeter of space around, just to make sure that I have good contact, that I have enough material to kind of smooth on there. Now I'm going to smooth it together. I'll use my wooden rib to clean it up, kind of compress it, get rid of any excess clay down there. Now I can just use my thumb and just work that edge a little bit. And then down here you notice it's kind of sharp, so I want to really round that out. And there I have a pretty decent cylinder. The top's a little wild, so I can cut that down a little bit, and I can use this technique where I just use a tool here, one with a flat bottom, and then I can just kind of hold my needle tool right here. And I got plenty of cup. It's real tall. Maybe I even want to bring it down a little further. And I'm going to just rotate it. And it lined up just perfect. Now I know I can cut right along that line. I could use my needle tool. Fettling knife is probably best. Now I've got a pretty decent cylinder. From here, there's all kinds of things that I can do. I could flare it out a little bit and give it some shape. I could bend the lip out. I could put a handle on it. I could decorate the sides. But this is a really nice place to be, where I have this pretty clean, relatively thin form that's sort of a simple cup, or it's a blank canvas ready to be decorated. I want to make this a little fancier, so I'm going to clean it up a little bit, and then I'm thinking I'll put some ridges on it, and then I'll flare it out and then clean up the rim. Looks like it's got a little bit of a lean that way, so I can just kind of bang it. Okay, now I'm going to give it some ridges using my wooden rib, and I want to go straight up. Give it a little bit of support from the inside. It's nice to have some texture on your surface. Surface texture can work nicely with glaze. There's a lot of glazes that interact with surface that change color based on surface. So when you add texture, you're giving your glaze an opportunity to create some really interesting effects and really interesting variation. Now I'm going to flare it out a little bit. I can just use my hands here, and I'll just get in there and kind of push out and up, and I'm going to be real gentle because I don't want to tear my cup. Stop, take a look at it, see if I like that. Maybe it needs to start more from the bottom. And I like how it kind of tucks in a little bit here. And then I'll flare this lip out a little bit. Maybe I want to bring this bottom in a little bit more. So I'll kind of tuck that in as I rotate. Here I got a little bit of a tear happening just from stretching, but it's pretty moist here, and I can just kind of compress it and smooth it over, and that's just fine. So I'm pretty happy with the shape that's happening here. I want to clean up the bottom a little bit more, and then clean up the top. This lip, you want it to feel nice on your lip, so spend a little time and smooth that out. I recommend using a sponge with a little bit of water and just kind of working that surface. And that's pretty good right there. It's got some kind of chunky stuff on the side, and I'll just wait until it's bone dry and sand it a little bit to get rid of some of the lumpy stuff on there. I could be done with it there, but you know, maybe I want a handle too. Yeah, I think that would look nice with a handle. Shape that handle a little bit. It's got a nice, I think this needs kind of an S to it, so it's kind of graceful. You know, this has a nice sort of graceful curve to it, so it's nice if the handle has that graceful curve, and I don't want it to be too bulky. It should have a nice proportion with the cup, so I'll cut off a little bit more here. Cut it here so it kind of contours with the cup. So I like these ridges on the cup, and I want to get some of those ridges on this handle, and it's hard to get in there with my rib, so I'll use my wooden knife, my wooden modeling tool here, and create those ridges, starting on the inside here in case I mess up. But once I get my flow, I'll go back to the outside. I want them to have the same spacing. I got a little wide on that last line, but that's okay. It's pretty organic. Now I'm ready to attach my handle, keep that nice S shape, and have this curve of the handle kind of meet up with the waist of the cup. And then I'm going to mark where I want it to be, making sure it's not all the way at the top, unless, you know, maybe that's your style and you want it to be all the way at the top, but generally not what you want. And you definitely don't want it all the way at the bottom, because you'll not be able to glaze it or it will stick to the kiln shelf. Score. A little water on here. Water. A little slip. A little slip. Score. Score, and then attach that handle, pressing it in down there, giving it a good shape, nice and perky, happy handle. Get my brush that's wet and really kind of smooth it in. I want a nice transition down here. Add a little bit more clay in there just to get a nice transition. And then I'll redo some of my lines. And look, now they can meet up with the lines at the bottom of the cup. Oh, I love that. That is great. Then it really feels incorporated. Up at the top here, it's a little more abrupt, so it's not going to be quite as fluid. See how it feels in my hand. Remember, it's going to shrink by at least 10%, maybe even 12%. So good to have a little extra room. Feels pretty good. And then on the inside, there's a little bit of lines left over from when we attached it. So I'm going to get inside here with a wet brush and just smooth out the attachment on the inside. Don't want to get it too wet because it can crack if there's water just kind of pooling in there. Make sure the bottom's clean. It's got a flat bottom, so I'm going to indent it just a little bit so that it sits nicely, right? You don't want this to bulge out. You want it to indent just a little bit so it sits good. And then I'm going to sign it. Now I'll leave this loosely wrapped up. Allow the air to get to it. Let it dry slowly, especially let that handle dry slow. And then once it's bone dry, I'll sand it, get some of the little chunks off there.
It's bone dry now, so I can do some carving and some cleanup. It's good to create a foot on all of your projects. And what that does is creates a place for the glaze to stop. You're never supposed to have glaze going all the way down to that very bottom edge. The glaze always needs to be up at least 1/8 of an inch, if not more. So that foot needs to have a space here that's minimum 1/8 of an inch, somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 of an inch. And usually there's some sort of change of direction that happens. A traditional foot carves in on the inside. And that's enough of a little foot there to create a little bit of shadow and sort of tell the glaze where to stop. And that's enough of a foot right there to create a little bit of a shadow and tell that glaze where to stop, make it feel kind of resolved.